Okay. I actually pretended I understand the introduction, but actually not. I have been in Paris for many times, actually, about 5 or 6 times, but it's a little bit shameful for myself that I didn't learn French at all. So sorry, I have to give you a lecture in English. Seeking the origin is today's topic. I will explain a little bit more about why I choose this topic for my recent practice. I guess maybe some of you guys know China pretty well, especially there are a lot of Chinese people today here. But maybe I guess some of you might not know that well. So I will give you some background about what happened in the past 15 to 20 years in Chinese urbanization. I selected several pictures from a Hong Kong photographer. He actually just keep tracking, use the photograph to record what happened to many Chinese cities in the past 20 years. As you can see, or you might already know that China has been almost the biggest construction site in the earth for the past 20 years. This drastic urbanization just happened just so fast. It's beyond everybody's expectation. And from the picture, you see that there's a lot of things happened to the city. Like this old texture gets erased, replaced by this new gigantic structures. These all are taken in the ordinary cities, and that's what happened actually. See this massive structure, this is the residential compound. But things are changing actually, I have to say, because after this 20 years transformation, there might be different reasons why the situation is a little bit different. Because first of all, the economic situation is different. The Chinese economic is slowing down a little bit. So people have time to rethink about, is this the right way we build our cities? Or is this the right way we design our architecture? And second of all, there's more and more voices actually asking and questioning this kind of massive construction, and people will start challenging this kind of policy and strategies. So as an architect, for myself, to my perspective, I think there is something very important about architecture has been missing for the past 20 years in the most Chinese construction or architecture profession, which is something relates to the spirit. I think the good space, well, that's the primitive power of architecture, that it can always touch human soul. It's not only a physical space or a tangible form. It has that its undescribable ambience can really talk to you. I think good architecture has that quality. For example, if you go to Pantheon in Rome, built like 2,000 years ago, or even you go to Ranshan Chapel, designed by Corbu probably 50 or 60 years ago, you always feel that essence of that space, and it's just there. It's primitive and fundamental. I think that's the real meaning about the architecture to our human being, and that's what we try to do in our practice. So I just give you a quick background about why I select this seeking the origin. That's the origin what I'm talking about. China is big. As you can see, on the left part is the comparison between China and France. So even though we call China as one country, but we even have 56 races in China, different races. different people, different culture, even language is different. And climate-wise, geographical features are all very different. It's really a big country. The reason I'm saying this is because I don't believe in one generic strategy can cover the whole situations. For us, each project is a unique issue that we have to face. We have to find a unique solution for each project. Because our project is actually scattering around the whole country almost. But today, because of the time limitation, I selected 3 projects that, which actually reflect, to some certain extent, reflect our thinking about the design practice. But they're actually in 3 kinds of locations. For example, the first one is the fishing boat captain's house. It's actually in the countryside. And the second one, the courtyard hybrid, is actually in Beijing. It's in the old town fabric, very urban. And the third one, the seashore library, which is actually shown on the poster, is actually in a rural area, far away from Beijing, but it's a residential compound. It's more like a residential community. So the 3 types, I think they're very different and they're very unique by itself. I will just go through them one by one. The first one, the fishing boat captain's house. It's not a building from scratch. It's actually a renovation project. It just finished actually last month. So maybe most of you guys don't know this project yet. That's the red spot is the location of the project. It's in the southern part of China. This is China, the profile. And it's in front of the ocean. Beijing is almost, our office is here. So every time I go to the site, I have to travel a lot. Just like 3 hours, that's like. But this is the site plan. It's the location of the house. It's in a peninsula. And this is a fishing village, actually. The interesting of this location is it's right in the neck of this island. So it has the shortest distance to the sea on both sides. That's very important for us for the future design concept. See, that's the village. It's not pretty at all, it's just chaotic. But I love it. Every time I go there, I smell the fish. Because it's the fishing village. The reason I love it is because you see the whole package of life inside this village. In some Chinese villages, because farming, you probably cannot make a lot of money out of it. So young guys start leaving their home to the city. They want to make a better life in the urban area. So if you go to some of the villages in China, it's empty. It's only old people and kids. But this one is different because fishing is very profitable for those guys. So they still keep the whole layers of generation. You feel the real life inside this village. It's very energetic. But the construction of the whole village is kind of sad. That's their home before the renovation. Just a brick masonry building with the cement covering the surface. This is a dramatic view that the home is actually right on a cliff. So it has a very specific and a unique character of the site. That's the captain actually, captain's couple. Very nice people. The reason actually I do this project is partially because they're very honest people. And you feel the real character from those guys. That's the original house before the project, before the renovation. And that's the daughter. you can see this is all because of the water leaking. When you build something in such close distance to the ocean, you always have the risk that the water is very easily just leaking inside the space and destroy all the materials. That's the daughter's bedroom. So it's a very typical family in that village. See, leaking is all destroyed by the water. And even the structures start corrosion because you have the salt in the air close to the ocean. So the rebar inside the concrete get rusted and expand. So that will break this cement on top of it. So that's all the challenges that we have to face. We have to enhance their living condition by just try to avoid this kind of problems happening in their new house. But in addition to this, the captain wants to add the third floor on their existing structure because every year they have a lot of friends and relatives to visit them. So they need more space to accommodate these visitors. That's even more challenging for us because their current structure is already kind of weak. But all besides of these problems, if you stay in their space, you have the most beautiful view in the world, I guess. As I said in the beginning, the location of the house is right in the narrowest place of the island. So it's easily, you look to the east, it's a very calm, silent, poetic ocean view. But when you look to the west, it's a very busy harbor. And they actually, all the fishing boat, it's just, it will just like in the harbor like this. That's the captain. That's the first day when I went to the site. And this guy is important. It's our structural engineer. Actually give us a lot of help during the design process. So the whole concept of design starts with how we reinforce the structure. Because, as I said, we have to make the current structure stronger. At the same time, we have to add the third floor. So if you can see the red lines indicating the new layer of additional concrete. The existing structure is the brick masonry and with some concrete frames. So we have been talking about different possibilities, but eventually the structural engineer gave me this kind of solution, and which I like, because in addition to, we can add the third floor on the top because of the new reinforcement of the structure. We also can have some freedom to do something more. For example, because of the new layer of the concrete, we can rearrange the layout. That's the existing layout. For me, the problem is that they have a bathroom right in between the living space and the ocean. This direction is the ocean. So it's blocking the light and also it's blocking the view. Because of the new structure, we can relocate the bathroom to the corner, which I think is a back wall of the house, sharing with the neighbors. There was no much light anyway in that area. So we can open up the view to the East Ocean, and we can let more air and to flow into the space, and the light also as well. Same thing we did for the second floor. This is their original location of the bathroom, and that's the new location of the bathroom. It's all along this back wall, which is to the north actually. That's the new addition to the third floor, which I will explain that later. They don't have any specific desire about the function of the third floor. They just need a space can accommodate different kind of life inside. And as I said, the new structure can give us another freedom to remanipulate the location of the window. And because of the thickness of the combination of the brick, this layer is the brick, original, and this darker layer is the new concrete. So we have the thickness of the wall. And we actually project the new concrete structure outside the wall by 30 centimeters. The reason we do that is because the captain told me every summer they have these hurricanes or typhoon. And when it rains, the water will just flow in all directions on the wall. That causes a very serious problem of the window water leaking. So by project this window frame by concrete, we can actually avoid a large amount of water to low down the risk of the water leaking of the window system. So because of the thickness of the walls and the projection, the windows start becoming a space, but not just a very thin cut opening on the wall. And we actually use the space to design some activity inside it, which I will explain that later. Yeah, that's a sketch showing the window become a couch, for example. Or the window can extend into space as a table. That's what we thought in the design process. Of course, we have been through a sort of comparison with different options. Now I talk about the third floor, the new addition. We choose the shape of an arch. We have many reasons to do that. First of all, I think it's the most efficient way to let the water run away from the roof. Because before, the roof water leaking is pretty serious. So if we do an arch, there will be no water stay on the roof. So that will reduce the risk of the water leaking on the roof. That's the first reason. And the second reason, because we did this concrete new reinforcement along these two sides, so this arch seems it's a kind of natural outcome. The wall actually grow up and converge on the top. In addition to this, the arch has a very clear direction facing to the east and west. And I explained just a moment ago, because on their rooftop, which at the third floor level, they can enjoy the ocean view up to the east and the west. So the arch become a connector of these two ocean landscape to just transform them into the human perception. And there's another reason for the arch is because their family is actually religious people. They believe in Christian. So the arch has a little bit hidden indication of religion. That's the reasons that why we chose arch as the final design decision. So as for me, the lower part, the two floors, is actually their family life, daily life. But the top part is a space that belongs to the ocean, to the landscape, to their, all kinds of activities of their family. That's all the sketches along the process. So you can see we actually really care about this east and west direction, which actually the arch can connect them together. That's axiomatic drawing. Now the construction started. Well, because they have to put a new layer of the concrete, so they have to drill the holes in the original brick. So these two kind of structure can hold each other in a stronger way. They cut the existing slabs in order to put the new beams into it. That's, they're just It's almost like naked. That's the top floor, the third floor deck before the arch exists. They made the first pitch of the stud, the structure, support the concrete frame because the arch is made of concrete. That's the guy. That's the first piece erected. The shape starts showing. It's actually a very interesting comparison of this picture we found in the internet. This is our construction site when they're doing the arch, but this is when people make a boat. Of course, the boat will be reversed when they put in the water, but because this owner is the captain, I don't know if this is a very logical relationship, but I found it's very interesting. Well, it's already beautiful by itself. That's when they start pouring the concrete. They put the rebars inside the formwork and start pouring the concrete, cast in place. This is really a handmade project because the valley of this, the alley of the village is very, very narrow. There seems like no big machine can approach to this building, so everything has to be carried by hand. That's when everything is almost finished. See this arch? So as you can see, there's some new buildings, but they still have the old houses built like 200 or 300 years ago in the Qing dynasty. That's the building. That's the final outcome of this entire project. The lower two floors were actually just paint by the waterproofing paint with the brownish color, but the top part is concrete. That's the building in the twilight. At some part, we actually leave the texture of the old bricks. We didn't really actually cover them out. We just paint a very thin layer so you still can feel that the old materials still existing there. That's the third floor, the inside the arch. And when the weather is nice, they can slide all this door to be open so the entire space become a pavilion rather than an interior space. Actually, this is the view to the east, so you can see this very peaceful ocean. But when you look into the west, you will see this busy harbor, and that's the initiative design concept that we would like to achieve. This is the mezzanine level to make a more useful space, but at the same time, structurally, this is important to hold the arch together. As I said, structurally, the arch, because we can just get rid of all these columns and beams, the contour of the space is the same with the contour of the structure, which I personally like that. This is when you stand on the mezzanine level and look to the east. We call this small space as an ear window, just in the arch like this. And in this space, you have the chance to look at the top of the roof. And that's probably the only place that you can take a look of this arch from the top. And in the daytime, the building is actually blending into the village pretty well because of the color and the texture, I guess. See, it's all the messy surroundings. But at night, it becomes very different. because the more transparent facade, the more light comes from inside. So it makes this building an outstanding piece in the village. See, this is new and old. Actually, I have a film. Can tell you a more complete story. This is the window furniture I was talking about. Each window becomes a furniture in between the inside space and the outside landscape. So you can see that's the window arrangement. The operable window is always actually on the inside of the frame because we want this frame to protect the water from the rain. But the fixed window is on the outside of the window frame to make more space of the interior. And that's one example of the window. So you can just open it like that. And that's the window become a living room, a television shelf. So the window becomes an extension from outside to inside, at the same time from inside to outside. And people actually can sit here reading a book. That's a window become a couch, a table. That's the daughter's new bedroom. Okay.
C'est l'arrière.
Of that project. They treat me a free karaoke after the completion. Seems like they like me.
Excuse me.
Sure.
I'm just going to go by. It's very chopping. There's a story behind this house linked to television.
Yeah.
But you didn't mention it.
Yeah, because I can talk about it maybe after.
Yeah.
That's actually the reason why I get to know this the family, and maybe I can talk about that a little bit, because for me this is a very precious opportunity to design a home, because you know the owner before you design that. Comparing with when you design a residential building for the real developer, real estate developer, you don't know nothing. You don't know who will live here, and you design hundreds of families maybe within 3 months. But this one is different because it's very specific for people that you have to be friends with them. The reason I know these people is because in Shanghai there is a television series program called 梦想改造家. It's called like dreaming, how to translate? Dreaming, renewing home, sort of like that. It's a public TV program. It's not like an architectural profession. And they record the whole process. The first day I went to the site, and all the way to the very last day the project was completed. And they actually broadcast it in their TV station. So that's the background of this project, which actually is a very interesting experience for me.
But you didn't know them before the beginning of the program? How did they select you?
They select me because they, I don't know why. They select, every year they select one architect. Every year. Do you know Dash House in Shanghai? Was the last architect they selected last year. They select me and they ask me if I want to do this, but I didn't really accept the offer immediately because I know nothing about the family. I don't know if they're mean people. And I don't know nothing about the location. So I went to the village first and I get to know these 4 people. I start liking them, and also I like the location of their house, so we collaborate. Yeah, that's the background story of this. Okay. The second project, I have to be faster. This is, we call it courtyard hybrid. This is actually in Beijing Old Town, in Baitasi area, which is in the middle of it's inside the second ring. It's the center of the city. As you can see, this is the Forbidden City, and that's the location of the project. That's the second ring, actually. So it's in the old town, old part of Beijing. That's the picture taken about 30 or 40 years ago, the same district. We call it Baitasi is because of this structure here. It's a historical preservation building. And this is a new construction built after the liberation. At that moment, there's a lot of specialists, experts from different industries go into Beijing to construct the new capital of People's Republic of China. So they have to have some place to live. So within the old town, they build this kind of gigantic structures right inside this old fabric. You see, this is all the courtyard, which is actually the traditional living space of the Beijing people, regular people. This is a map from Qianlong, Qing Dynasty, which is about almost like 300 years ago. And you can clearly see the courtyard fabric. See, each family, they have a yard. It's very clear. But after the 1950s, because there's more and more people actually squeeze inside the city, so before, one courtyard is belonging to one family, in the most cases. But in the recent 30 or 40 years, for the most courtyards are shared by multiple families because of the lacking of space, of living space. The black part is when so many people living in such an insufficient space, they start building their own kitchen, storage room, or even some small bedrooms whatsoever. So the entire urban fabric changed. You won't be able to perceive that the clear courtyard fabric as what we have in the last map. You see, all this yard are actually filled by this new addition of this kind of family construction. That's the traditional Beijing courtyard. It's kind of a very beautiful memory for Beijing people. A peaceful space inside the house and connect your life with the sky and with the ground. That's the conventional lifestyle of Beijing. But that's the project we're facing actually. You can see the whole yard is taken by this new addition of this different families construction. That's the yard. That's our project, actually. The owner, the client of this project is actually a government background company. what they're trying to do is that they want to revitalize this old district in Beijing, because along with this, this courtyard, quality of the space is going down. The rich people, they're moving out because they have money to buy new apartments or in some better area. So the whole district actually become like a rental residential compound for lower income people. And they want to bring some new energy into the district. So they start negotiating with these people. Within this 200 or 300 yards in this district, they actually successfully get 10 or 11 yards that they can buy from all those people, and they get good compensation to move out, so they can use the yard at some other public functions. That's the background of this project. The structure is always, the current structure is unsafe almost. And that's the space inside the yard. Comparing with the image I show you, the original courtyard in Beijing, this has a very big difference in terms of the spatial quality. And you can imagine you live in this narrow space with different families in one yard. So that's even more sad, I think. So the topic of the design is, between this current condition and the old Beijing courtyard, what we have to do for this renovation of the project. This is some keywords in the beginning of the design. Sorry, this is in Chinese. Recovering, reorganizing, inserting layers of time, and so on and so forth. And that's the keywords that before the design we have to remind ourselves that what we're trying to do in this small space. In the very beginning, the program is a public library lounge coffee bar. That's the very initial program that client gave us. So we designed this, we keep this original footprint of the main building, and we remanipulate all these different volumes, clusters of small space to make it as a functional space for a library or a lounge. This is the first round of the concept. But after we have done this, the client told me they changed their mind. They said, we don't have enough capability to operate this lounge because that needs some professional skill, So they said, we need some space to get quick money. So they want to add 2 residential studios inside this small yard. That's actually more like a safer operation because they just rent the space out, they can get the money back. I said, okay, let's try that. But at the same time, the good thing of the client is they still want to keep the yard public. So as you can see from the diagram, these are 2 studios which could be rented out. And in the middle, we leave a space for a public cafe. And we have a yard which is belonging to everybody, sharing the yard. I think what we're trying to do is that we still keep the concept of using yard to organize the whole space. So you can see the studio has a small yard. They have their own privacy. But the public yard is shared with everybody. And this is like a multiple pavilion space. It could be rent as an office, or maybe it could be some event space later on. That's what the client told me. And I think there's an interesting part of this entire courtyard is that this is one hutong. That's another hutong on this side. So we're trying to keep a connection inside the yard to let the people could be freely penetrate from one side of the hutong to another. I think that's something which I personally feel very interested about this project. So we developed this project. So you see 2 studios. with small bedrooms and kitchens and their own yard. Of course, this wall is translucent to keep the privacy of the studio. And they have a gate outside their room. And then one public cafe with 2 small spaces on both sides. And this is the connection of the 2 hutongs. And we use some large-scale model to test this, this kind of arrangement. So what we do is that we reorganize all these clusters of small boxes to make them, to give the privacy of each function. At the same time, we keep this kind of original shape of the courtyard as a very clean shape to try to make a peaceful atmosphere inside the yard, which you can see later on in the picture. So the urban texture is not very much disturbed. This is the old and that's the new. We just reorganize all these small boxes. That's a diagram showing the layers of this concept. That's the space layout, and that's the structure. We have 2 kinds of structures, I will explain later, and that's the roof system. That's the model showing the different kinds of activities and the spatial quality. The scale of the model is large, so we can really try to see the space, try to imagine what it will look like after the construction. And that's the studio actually for the rental. So we went to the construction document phase. And then one day a client called me, they changed their mind again. They said, well, we'll calculate. Even though we rent that studio out, it's not a big money at all. So let's get rid of the studios. Let's make it as an entirely public space for event, for exhibition, for meeting, for conference, whatsoever, to attract more people into this zone and have more interaction between these outsiders and the local people, which I think, okay, it's okay. Architect is always magic, right? So we get rid of these 2 studios to make a more generic big space for multiple functions. But the good thing is everything else is kept. So you see these 2 pavilions, small yards, big yards. We have a long bench over here. And we leave the small gap with the neighbors to let the air and the light to penetrate into the space. And this hutong and that hutong is connected by the path here. And that's the structure model that we did in the process. Basically, it's a 2 kind of structure system. This, the north building, which is the main building of this courtyard, we have to keep the original structure. That's the law in Beijing. But the new addition, we select sort of prefabricated laminated bamboo as the main structure material. The good thing of this is could be actually made, pre-made before the construction, so it can shorten the process of the construction, partially done in the factory. And this is almost like a juxtaposition of these 2 kind of system. That's the relationship in plan between this new structure and the old. That's some details of how we hold this structure together. This is the new addition, the laminated bamboo. Because it's always come from as a plate, so we have to find the detail, to make it like a column by these holders periodically. That's after construction. This one. Just like we add a piece of wood in the yard. Well, this is typical smog weather in Beijing. We almost like half of the year, we always have that air quality. And that's the main yard after construction. So you see this is the old structure, like a traditional structure. And that's the new addition. Different angles of the space. All the surfaces are flexible because we just try to think when the weather allows, when all the surfaces are open, the space are become more fluent. That's some tectonic details about how this plate, the bamboo plate, are held together by these holders, small clips. This is a big sliding door. You can slide all open when the weather allows. That's the main building inside the main building. Because of the space is so tiny, so we have to design a series of this rotatable furniture to give more flexibility of the use. That's one of it. So this is rotate to a closed condition. That's another rotatable shelf. That's the bench. Small corridor. That's the main yard and the smaller yard here. And from outside, it's like this. This is the traditional way how this kind of Butong building look like. And we give a little bit touch about this entrance to make it special, but at the same time work, because the size of the glass break, it works together pretty well. And this is a sliding door in the entrance to make this as a small vestibule. The main yard, we try to keep this kind of calm atmosphere, which is consistent with the traditional Beijing courtyard. That's the reason why we try to actually remain this square shape in plan, to make it very simple and calm. This is when the sliding door are open. That's another side of the main yard, actually. That's the lighting. Well, we select this special material, like a glass brick, because in some of the walls, we have to try to keep the privacy of this space. So this translucent material can help us to achieve that goal. But within this direction, it's always transparent glass. We want people to see through different layers of the space to feel that this small yard has a bigger feeling of this space. So it's translucent in that direction, but transparent in this direction. That's the brick. We like it because we use the same size with this the true brick. So in the daytime, they work together pretty well. But at night, this brick starts shining, especially when the light comes from behind. See, that's the glass brick, and that's the brick, the real brick. Different angles of the space. And even in the entrance, they actually work along each other pretty well. That's an operable sky window for the ventilation. And then we have some skylights too. Because the space is small, we try to make some opening on the top for people to look out to the tree. As the light comes down. So at night, the light will actually come from inside to outside. This is the existing tree that we kept. However, 2 weeks before I come here, the client called me again. For me, this is almost like a torturing process that I have been experienced for recent years. She said, because of they think this is a good completion in terms of the quality of the space, and a lot of people visit the space. And some of them tell them they want to pay high price to rent the space for private use. And the client told me they're thinking about that. So sometimes I feel architect is so vulnerable. That happened a lot in China. So if you guys try to practice in China, you have to be careful of that. Okay, so that's actually, well, the good thing is at least they have one public exhibition inside the space. It's in the Beijing Design Week. That's when the yard hosts the exhibition. They make this temporary exhibition design inside the space. Okay, so that's the last project I'd like to share with you guys. It's the Seashore Library, which is on the poster. This is actually a facility inside a residential community. And that's the location of the project. So comparing with the captain's house, it's much more to the north part of the China. And it's in the Bohai Bay. So the water level is actually pretty stable because of the Bohai Bay. They don't have typhoon or hurricane in this area. So the ocean is more calm in terms of the climate character. And as you can see, this is the compound 2 years ago, but now they're expanding all the way to this area already. And this is red spot is the location of the library. That's the compound. This is the library, and that's the church, also designed by us. But 3 years ago, when the first time when I went to the site, it's really primitive. There's almost like no building at all. So you feel you stand in front of the ocean, you almost feel a little bit unsafe because when you see this kind of gigantic nature in front of you. And that really affected us, the feeling of the first day. And we take some pictures, is some objects along the beach in that day. This is a temporary shelter of a local fishing people. It's already abandoned. It's not in use anymore. But when you go in, the space is dark because they have so tiny openings. So you feel the time is almost like suspended. It's only left you and the ocean. Everything else starts disappearing. All this kind of impression affect us in the future, in the later design process. So the landscape becomes like a painting hung on the wall. And this is very important for us. This is done by a very famous Japanese artist called Hiroshi Sugimoto. They call it Ocean Series. It's just very simple landscape, this horizontal geometry of this horizon of the ocean. But because of different weather, season, time, it's almost like a drama. And for us, our library is actually in front, facing this drama. So we start the design process with section to study how the light and wind come into the space. This is an important sketch I'd like to explain a little bit more. The ocean is to this direction. So obviously the space has a very clear direction facing the ocean. But this is to the east in terms of the orientation. So as you know, that the library wants to evenly distribute light in the most time of the day. Because of it's to the east, so when the sun, when it's like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, the sun will go around the building. So most of the light will be blocked by the concrete wall to the south facade and the west facade. And the entire space is stepping because we like people won't block each other when they look out to the ocean. And you see this curve is actually reinforce this direction to the ocean. We know later on there will be residential buildings to this side, so we make this elevation more solid to isolate people, you know. And the curve actually goes down to the floor to leave a horizontal opening underneath the bench. This is a long bench, actually, to give this cross ventilation into the space. This entire building has no air conditioning at all, so it's all passive. We have to think about this, the natural way to ventilate it, to cool it down, because the building is used in the summertime for the most cases. And on the roof, we cut these tunnels to reinforce the cross ventilation. But at the same time, during the afternoon of the day, the sun will cast very small shadows into the space because of the angle is actually calculated towards the sun. The east facade is more transparent. In the lower part is a line of pivot door. So when the weather allows, all the doors can rotate to open to make the space like a more pavilion rather than a building. That's the east facade section. We want to give a wide open view in this level, make it more transparent. So we have to actually eliminate all the structure members along this surface. So we use the truss to carry the load of the roof. But we don't want to expose this kind of industrial member too much. So we use a glass break on both layers to cover the truss. That's the different sections of the building. Again, we use a large-scale model to test this lighting condition inside the building in the design process. I think computer can never really replace this the physical model, because the sunlight is so sophisticated that computer can't really calculate. That's the plan. Very simple functions. Our big reading space, that's the second floor actually. Stepping. This is a small meditation room right next to it. And this is an outdoor deck separating this main space to an activity room, because there's always event with noise happening in this space. So the deck will actually block the noise. That's the entrance in the first floor. That's a small bathroom, office, and supplementary program like a bar, pantry. So construction. This is when they do the mock-up for the first time. As you can see, that's the quality of when they're doing the concrete. We work with a very local team. They never had the experience to do this exposed concrete. So when they have this first mock-up wall done, the client called me. He said, Gong, maybe we have to change the material into paint. I said, just ask them to do the second piece. So they do the second piece, third piece. The third piece is perfect, even better than the main building actually, because it's a smaller size, easy to control. We use the wood material as the formwork, so the concrete actually are impressed by this wood texture to leave this kind of a warmer texture relates to our human being, comparing with this flat concrete. So they start building the foundation, setting up the rebars. Because the wood is alive, it's kind of a material with life. It could shrink or expand because of the different temperature, humidity. So they have to always to brush the water on top of it to make it more stable. And they even have to set up the sunshade in the construction process to avoid the wood to become too warm, too hot. That's when they actually set up all the formwork in the process. They're doing the stud for the curved roof on the ground and putting to the space, and then put the formwork. This is the moment that they're trying to cast the concrete right before that. This is when they start to making these ventilation tunnels on the roof. That's after the concrete was casted. Again, we use this glass brick. This is almost like we actually customize this brick with a very small factory close to the construction site. This is something good in China at this current moment. It's not the fully industrialized yet. So you still have the chance to find a small craftsman to work something unique without paying too much. You see this C shape. Because we have to leave the space to hide a steel bar inside. And this steel bar is help the brick wall to be stronger to resist the lateral force, because along the seashore, always a big wind. And this steel bar will be connected to the main truss by these small details here, every other certain distance. So after the construction, this two layer of wall work together with the main structure as a combination of the structure system to resist the lateral force. Important guy, the leader of the team of the construction. I'm very much grateful to this guy because even though he has no experience doing this kind of high quality building, but he's a very responsive people. So I really be very thankful to him. So I just go go through it very fast because the movie already tells the story. That's when the nice weather, when this first floor pivot door are all open, it becomes like more like a pavilion rather than a building. This is when the light comes from inside. That's the entrance. Small window. The main space. And that's the shadow I'm talking about. It's in the afternoon time when the light penetrates into the space. And you really can feel it's moving. Not literally moving, but after 10 minutes, the position is changing because the tunnel has a distance. It's very sensitive to the sun movement. Different angles. This is interesting. This is when I stand in the east facade and the west light penetrates that tunnel, casting shadows on the east facade. And that's when the ventilation are all, this is electronically controlled sky window. They're all open. That's the main space. And this is the curve, and that's the bench I was talking about. And that's the ventilation window. But because it's facing to the west, so when the sun goes down at the sunset time, the light is parallel to the floor and start slicing into the space. See, this is almost like a zero angle. The reason the natural light becomes a very important theme of this project is because the environment is so primitive. So the light condition is primitive too. Comparing with we design a building in the urban area, it will be very different because the existing structures will block the light quite much. Say that's the slice of light in the sunset time. That's the meditation space right next to the main space. The texture of the wood formwork concrete. We have another curved deck on top of the meditation space. It's actually, when you climb up to this deck, you won't be able to see the ocean, but you can listen to the waves. That's the stair you climb up to that curved deck. That's the main space of the reading room. That's the activity room. We have one sky window to the east, another one facing to the west. So interestingly, in the afternoon, when the light comes from west, it's warmer tone. But the skylight is actually a colder tone. So it has the different colors of light, but at the same moment happening in one space. That's when the light comes from inside the twilight condition. So for me, I use this picture to explain more about this design concept. I think the architecture has the power to reveal the energy of the site into something that people could perceive. For example, as you can imagine, without the stone, the water flow you probably won't be able to know is flowing. But after you put the stone inside the water, you see the rippling around it. So I think the stone is what architecture can do when you design something in a particular site. It really can reveal that the hidden energy of the site. And I believe this energy are existing in every piece of site. So that's what I believe in the power of architecture. In this project, we feel that. I spent another 1 minute to go through how the building is used after the completion. This is about last year, about May. Right after the opening, this building has been posted onto the internet by a very famous Chinese new media called 一条, means one piece a day, right? They are very popular. They have a lot of fans. So all of a sudden, this building, before it's more like a community facility, but all of a sudden, it's like this. The building has 75 seats, but within the 2 or 3 weeks, every day there will be 3,000 people going there. So they have to take a long line. And the building is no longer like a library. It's like a train station. So the clients start realizing this is not the right way to operate it. So they actually start an online reservation system. So they control the number of the people. And that's like a normal condition of the space. But still a lot of people. So you see different people using this space. Students, I guess. We collect these all pictures from internet, from Weibo or whatever resources. This is the red, I guess maybe the people live in a compound. See this? And I like this picture because showing the curve in relation to the body, to the human body. Family, elderly, kids, sleeping, ladies, construction workers, because they still have construction site adjacent to the building. Girls, they're pretty. Lovers, friends, these celebrities, this is all famous in China. They shoot videos whatsoever, commercials. This guy is my idol. Cui Jian, it's a rock star. When I was in middle school, I listened to his music. That's the librarian, actually. Very nice guy. Ken Yahara is a Japanese famous designer. This guy is Parsenbach. He's the Paris architect. But this building is actually the church. It's also designed by us. We don't have the pictures. He went into the library, but I guess he went there because they're very close, only like 200 or 300 meters away from each other. It's awkward people.
Meditation.
Meditation. It's avant-garde artist. Different public activities, lectures, panel discussion, and so forth. Travelers, bicycle riders. This guy is, this picture definitely is taken in the afternoon with that circular shadow on his face. This pregnant lady. This is the, I guess maybe it's their graduation day. Students went there to take pictures. And they even have concert inside the space. And the stepping make it convenient to be like a concert place, like a theater. So for me, it's really a unique experience because this is almost the first time our project is exposed to the society outside the architecture profession because of the new media. And this is one of the newspaper actually has an article about this building, and I like one sentence of it, if I translate, is that within one seashore library, whatever person you are, you can see what you want to see. That's almost like the meaning of the sentence. But the reason I like this sentence is because through this 1.5 years after completion of this building, we get a lot of feedback from different kind of people. They criticize it, they compliment it, different kinds. It's very interesting that you experience that. And that really makes me feel the architecture space still has that power, relates to this social energy. And after this design practice of this project, I believe it more. I think that's the as what I said in the very beginning of the speech. Architecture still has that primitive power, really can resonate with different kinds of people in the society. And I think that's the fundamental meaning of architecture. So that's it. That's my... I think I talked too much. It's already 9:30.
Thank you very much. Are there any audience questions?